You're listening to Trek FM.
Want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners' discussion group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and we look forward to seeing you there.
This is Steve Sansweet of Rancho Obi-Wan, and you're listening to the 602 Club.
There was a little bar in Mill Valley where all the Starfleet trainees used to go.
The 602 Club.
You know it.
I was there more times than I can remember.
The Demogorgon! Will, your action!
I don't know.
Fireball him!
I'd have to roll a 13 or higher.
Too risky. Cast protection.
Fireball him!
Cast protection.
The Demogorgon is tired of your silly human bickering. It stops towards you. Boom! Fireball him, Will! Stop! Boom!
Cast protection.
It was in anger! And fireball! Where'd it go? Where is it? I don't know.
Is it a 13?
I don't know.
Oh
Where is it?
Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
Where is it? Can you find it yet? No, I can't
Oh my
find
god.
it.
Oh my
Hey!
god.
Is it Mom, we're in the middle of a campaign.
You mean the end? 15 after.
Oh my god. Oh, you idiot. We have to go. Mom, wait. Just 20 more minutes.
School night, Michael. I just put Holly to bed. You can finish next
But
weekend.
then I ruined the flow.
Michael.
I'm serious, Mom. The campaign took 2 weeks to plan. How was I supposed to know it was going to take 10 hours?
You've been playing for 10 hours?
Dad, don't you think that 20
I
more
think you should listen to your mother. Daggum piece of junk.
Welcome to the 602 Club as we travel back in time to 1983. I am just one of your gnarly rad hosts, Matthew Rushing, and with me tonight to talk about something stranger is the wonderful and talented Christy Morris.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
Good. I'm ready to get pumped and talk about Stranger Things.
Me too. I really am excited about that. So, it's this show just took the world by storm last year, like so unexpectedly. So I am really excited to dive in to talk about it, and really fun too. That did you know, Christy, that as we're recording today, the 24th of October, is actually, in 2017, for posterity's sake, is actually the 3rd anniversary of the 602 Club.
That is awesome.
Yes.
I did not know that until today.
Yeah. I'm really excited. I just want to thank everybody for listening, for supporting the show for so long, and we're going strong. The fact that we're still on the air is just phenomenal. As of this recording, with all the supplementals too, there's been 188 episodes of the show in 3 years. So that's pretty awesome. So I'm just really excited. And to top it all off, we got a new review. It's a 4-star review from Brian M47. And he said, a fun variety podcast that features different guests and different topics so it can appeal to a broad swath of the nerdy pop culture community. So thank you so much, Brian M47. I appreciate the review, and hit us up with a star rating review yourself. Honestly, we're 3 years old, but we can always grow. So go over to iTunes, give us a star rating and review. We'll thank you for your review and read it on the show, no matter what it is. And, of course, hit subscribe. That's a great way to get the episodes the moment that I publish them, so you never miss an episode of the 602 Club. You can get us wherever you get your podcasts as well, so if you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered. You can find us on Twitter at TrekFM and Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. If you want to join in the discussion with Christy and I about Stranger Things or anything we're talking about on Trek FM, you can go over to the Babel Conference, and that's our listeners-only discussion group. Now, you can get there on Facebook, type Babel in the search field, or if you're on the website at trek.fm, where we keep all of our shows and all of our show pages. Any of those show pages, you can hit discussion on the menu bar, and that'll bring you to the discussion as well over on Facebook at the Babel Conference. Last but not least, love getting emails from people. And if you want to talk about something that we've talked about here in the show, email us. I'd love to get some emails about what you think about what we've been talking about, whether it's Stranger Things, or we just recently did Kingdom of the Crystal Skull for Indiana Jones. We've done Bond and Marvel and DC and Star Wars and Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. I mean, anything you want to talk about, you email us, and maybe we'll have to start a new segment and read those on the show. That would be great. So, yeah, send us some emails and we can do that. Well, Christy, I wanted to start off with you because, as I kind of mentioned at the beginning, Stranger Things is one of those things that just kind of blew up. Like, it just became an overnight thing. Like, everybody was talking about it, and so I kind of wanted to know for you how you found Stranger Things.
Yeah, so I actually was always a Netflix binger since Netflix started, and saw it come up in the queue, but had not heard about it previously at all. It was like it suddenly snuck up on me, and I thought about watching it, but it took my sister telling me, "Have you seen this show Stranger Things?" And I said, "No, I haven't given it a chance yet. Why? What do you think?" And she said, "It will blow your mind." And I was like, okay, maybe I should watch it.
Well, and did it blow your mind?
It did.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. The thing that I always say about this show is that it reminds me of the classic 80s movies that I love in the sci-fi realm, but it also, without being overly gross, keeps bringing something new to the table, something creepy, but it's not going to absolutely terrify someone who's not a fan of horror.
Yeah, I know. I think that's a really good way to describe it. It's like the mixture of Spielberg 80s and, soft horror,
Mm-hmm.
and you put those two things together with some of, I feel like, that almost Hitchcockian suspense that they do, and you have this strange baby. And I'm right there with you. It was one of those things where all of a sudden everybody was talking about this show on Netflix, Stranger Things.
Because I didn't see any advertising beforehand.
Yeah, no. And I was wondering what it was, and I kind of looked it up, and I was like, I don't know. I'm not a horror guy, so I don't like horror movies, and I don't really love scary, super scary things. So I didn't have any idea how scary this might be. And then some friends of mine started watching it, like I think Tristan Riddell, and some other people that I knew were telling me that it was really good. And so I thought, you know what, my wife and I, we should give this a try. And that first episode, I think we just kind of fell in love with it. And it's cool because it's only 8 episodes. And so it is kind of one of those shows that's a little bit easier to binge watch anyway. A lot of Netflix seasons tend to be like 13 episodes, and you definitely have to space that out between a few days. This one, you can legitimately, if you wanted to, spend all day, watching Stranger Things and finish it off if you wanted to. And we're actually debating doing that with Stranger Things 2, but yeah.
It's hard not to. They always leave you thirsty for more.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, with this one, this is kind of interesting because so John Mills and I had just talked about Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And that movie has all to do with the US and the Russians kind of looking at and trying to harness, psychic power and the supernatural. And it was so funny watching this show because the storyline of Stranger Things is the exact same thing. Like the setting of it.
That's so weird.
Yeah, is that it's in the 80s though, and that the US government's been conducting experiments on people trying to understand and harness psychic power and the supernatural. And I thought it was so interesting how that connected with what we watched last week. I'd never put that together before.
I wonder if they all talked about that at all, if it was any influence also on what they did. It doesn't seem like it, though, because they're talking about the Duffer Brothers' influence was more Spielberg and Stephen King.
It's interesting because, obviously Spielberg is the director of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of Crystal Skull, and that does take place in this, the 50s. And obviously they're thinking all of these, like, 80s movies, whether it's Close Encounters of a Third Kind, or you feel like the Goonies feel, or any of those kind of things kind of all get wrapped up into this little ball that we call Stranger Things. But I just thought that was so interesting, and what a really kind of crazy thing to kind of build this story around that gives you the opportunity then to explore, the supernatural, this upside down world, the Demigorgon or the monster, or whatever you want to call them, all of those things, just the way that they kind of put this story together, I honestly think is kind of masterful.
Yeah, and I'm going to piggyback off of that and agree with you and say I like how they seem to take all these different influences but somehow make a way for them to weave in together that still makes sense.
Yes,
and I especially was thrilled. Of course, I'm a geek. Proud of it. I actually played Dungeons and Dragons. So
okay, awesome.
When I first saw them playing in the first episode, I went, yes, they're just like me.
Well, and what's so funny is, when you were talking about that idea of the way that they kind of weave all of these different types of 80s movies together and all of those genres, I also feel like they're weaving all of those things together in the way that J.K. Rowling weaves together her story with Harry Potter, where so much of it feels familiar, but she also creates something new. And Stranger Things does that exact same thing. It takes all of these things that we're familiar with and then creates its own universe. So Stranger Things universe does have references to lots of other things, from the 80s. But you don't watch it and think, oh, well, that's that, and oh, that's that, and
like it's just a ripoff.
Exactly. No, what they really do right in this show, I think, is create something that feels new and old all at the same time, and therefore, as you're watching it, it's kind of scary and stuff. Scary things happen, but you feel immediately comfortable with the world you're in. I feel like in the same way when I read Harry Potter for the first time. Like, I really felt comfortable in that universe, and it was because so much of what she was using was vaguely familiar, and yet it also felt new and rich and vibrant, and really, I think that's what we get with, like, the story and everything that the Duffer Brothers have found a way to create in Stranger Things.
And I will say, too, the Duffer Brothers, when I was looking up information on them, they're only 33 years old, and this is their third project.
So
that's
they've, like, barely lived
me.
through the 80s. Like,
yeah.
That's crazy. Like, because, I'm 38 as of the time of this recording. So
no way.
I have lived through some of the 80s, but it was more the late 80s, and not even the 80s that this show takes place in. And I think that's a real testament to how the story and the 80s, that they get this time period and its feel so well, in the sense that it's not so much that it's that familiarity of like, oh, I lived that and that's exactly like it was. It feels like all the movies that you watched back then. The way all the characters act, the way the kids act. I mean, the way the kids are kind of constantly using profanity. The same way that the 80s. Yeah, absolutely. Those kids, the way they use that profanity is the same way that those 80s movies characters used it too. And so it feels like it connects so well. They get the time period so right because it fits the pop culture idea of what the 80s was like. And it legitimately, it feels like they pulled this from the 80s.
Yeah.
Except for the Millennium Falcon's wrong, so.
Oh. But they did talk about Lando.
Yes, they do talk about Lando. But yeah, I remember seeing that first time and I was like, wait, that's not the right Millennium Falcon from the 80s. That's like from the 90s.
They picked one and went with it.
If you're going to do your research, get it right, Duffer Brothers. But yeah, no, I think this is absolutely just so well done in that sense. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was the whole other side of this, the upside down, the Demigorgon itself, and just that connection about what they're doing. How did that all work for you once the mystery kind of got unraveled?
So at first it really felt confusing because you see the Demigorgon suddenly come out of nowhere. Even though you know there's this whole upside down world, you're still thinking, well, how is he getting from there to this world? Because they are still two separate worlds. And I was saying to someone the other day, I'm going to be a total nerd for a minute and talk about the semantics of how the Demigorgon is getting from one world to another. But what I think in my head, and you can tell me if you think differently, that is that because 11 is the medium that opened the doorway, the Demigorgon can come into our world however he wants to, but we can't get to his world, the upside down, without going through a gate that was already open.
Ooh, that's a great question. I wonder if, because I think that you're on to something, but it also could be, obviously this thing has powers that which we don't understand. We don't really learn anything about the Demigorgon or the creature as anything else that lives there, really. But I'm also wondering if when, 11 goes nuts in the tank and creates the rift between the upside down and the right side up, I guess you would call it. That she also kind of fractures what we might consider in Star Trek language the space-time continuum between the universes. So it makes it easier for then the Demigorgon to break through, but it's still not enough for us to kind of break through to it.
Right, at least anywhere that we want to.
Right. We still have to go through the different fractures that truly have completely opened, which...
Right.
What was interesting, because like with the tree, it almost seems like that tree kind of slowly started to heal up. So, like I wonder if... Because we never see this as a possibility, but I'm wondering if once the Demigorgon opens a rift, if that stays open for a while and you're able to travel through that or not. Because like I'm thinking of when they get attacked in their house and it does come out of the wall or the ceiling, we never go back in that room and see the ceiling, so we don't know if it's still open or not. So I don't know, but it's interesting because when you start thinking about the semantics, you realize there are a lot of things that they didn't answer or show you, but you kind of didn't care.
Yeah. I feel like they either intentionally left them unanswered questions or they said no one's going to care.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I still don't care. It just makes for a fun, like you were saying, like a geeky discussion of like, the semantics of how you get from one universe to the other. And I think that's a hallmark of good storytelling, though. You tell what you need to tell to make it work enough for the audience as they're watching it. And you can leave those questions open, but I don't feel like by asking those that I'm in any way lessening the show. I almost feel like I'm more making more of it because I still have these questions that I would like to see maybe somehow answered. We have no idea what Stranger Things 2 is going to give us answer-wise. We know it takes place a year later, and that's pretty much it. And then we've seen trailers, but trailers can do anything with the material they have for 8 episodes. So, yeah, I just think it's a really strong season. Like the way that this season flows, the way the story goes, the use of the 80s and the way that all flows together, and then everything we get with, the upside down and this Demigorgon and everything here. Watching it again, I was wondering if it would hold up, like was it going to be as good? And I 100% truly feel that this show held up just as strongly as it did my second time through as it did my first time.
I completely agree. And to throw back in my D&D experience one more time, I love that they made this whole part with the upside down as a main part of the story, because as they were saying, Dungeons and Dragons, there's this thing called the Veil of Shadows, and that's how they explain to you in the audience what the upside down is. It's a mirror of your world that you have to get through only certain means, that is a dark version. And I love how they do the filming to make that world look so different, where it's this eerie, foggy things like particles floating in the air, kind of Twilight look to it. And that the creature may not necessarily be the Demogorgon like it is from the game, but that's what they're going to go with calling it. It's some kind of predator that only lives in the upside down.
Yeah, no, I really like the way that they do that too. That again, I think you're absolutely right. The Veil of Shadows, it did kind of remind me of the way the world looks when Frodo or Bilbo has the ring on.
Yes.
Where it's that like weird, fiery, like, it's not a place you want to stay. That netherworld, like you don't want to be there. So yeah, I feel like they do such a great job again of referencing things that we know, but then making it their own, so you don't just feel like, oh, they just pulled that from there. That's lame. That just doesn't happen. So really, really impressed. I kind of wanted to ask you, because we've been talking a lot about everything, but I kind of wanted to focus on a few different areas. I feel like the show has the kids, the teens, and the adults, and we kind of followed their stories and the interweave. So wanted to ask you about just the kids, Elle and Dustin and Lucas and Will and Mike, and how all of them worked for you.
Sure. So my favorite character, probably like most people, is definitely 11. But I was thinking the other day about, if I had to name just one, she would be it. But really, I also love Nancy and Dustin. Not to say that I don't like the other kids, but focusing on just the main character kids, really, I like 11 the best, and Dustin. But they have this friendship right from the get-go, just talking about the boys, that you feel like you're one of them. You can tell they've grown up together in this small neighborhood where it seems like everybody knows everybody. It feels safe enough to ride your bike home from school, and the parents don't really worry too much until suddenly Will goes missing. And even the next day in school, the kids are going, oh, well, he's probably just running late or something. They're just not super worried about it until then it's been 2 days. And, it takes them finally going and checking out all the places that he would usually hang out and things like that without trying to let on to his mom that they know something is not right. I just love that whole setup. And, to kind of telling you little stories about each of the kids, even though it surprises me thinking now they don't tell you much about Lucas's family.
No, really, or Dustin's. I mean,
yeah.
So the only kids that we really get to see their family life are Will and Mike.
Mm-hmm. And something that a friend pointed out to me too was, I wonder why the mom in the Wheeler house never went down to the basement to see what was going on down there once 11 moved in.
Yeah. That's one thing funny.
That takes off a little bit for me.
Well, and that is something that's like, you're talking about this idea, and I think one of the things that's so interesting is this really is a different time period. And I grew up in the later 80s and through the early 90s. The world was much different. We rode our bikes all over the place. We went and played down at the park next to the school at the end of our street, where my parents couldn't see us. We were building tree forts and doing crazy things. We had friends who lived out by the woods, and we would go play Indiana Jones in those woods. We did all that stuff that these kids do. And we wouldn't be home till supper. You know, like that was my life growing up. So,
But that was fine. Like
Yeah,
no one
absolutely.
was concerned that you were lost.
no, not at all. You know, and you only went inside if somebody got hurt, you know, because you needed a Band-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
And so, no, I think this feels so real to that. But the other thing that really struck me the first time watching through the show and the second time is how good of actors these kids are. Because if they're not
for being preteen
good,
kids.
yeah, if they're not good, this show sucks. I mean,
Yeah.
even if one of them's really bad, the show sucks because they're your main vehicle.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, really, Mike is like the hero of the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's the one that makes the decision, well, we've got to go find Will, and this is how we're going to do it. And then he meets 11 and decides to bring her into the group to look for for Will. And then he, you know, basically calls all of the shots.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And then Lucas is the one on the other side who's the cynical one. And it's the battle between those two, which I think is really interesting with Dustin in between now that Will's gone. No, you're absolutely right. And it makes such a fun dynamic. For me, you know, you said Elle is your favorite. For me, Mike is my favorite because Mike reminds me of me because I was the one who always fell for the girls, you know, the same way he falls for Elle. And so I get that, you know, but what I love is the way in which, so these nerdy kids have all been picked on their whole life for being nerdy, right? And they meet that other outcast kid, Elle. She comes in and they immediately, well, most of them except for Lucas, accept her.
Right.
And I thought it was so cool to kind of see that because they become this little band of misfits that, you know, like the island of misfit Stranger Things. And it's because of their experience with people treating them badly that they don't automatically just treat her badly. Like they treat her with love and respect and care and all of those things. Like I love that. Again, there was, It seemed almost Harry Potterish in that sense. Like Harry and his friends were the band of misfits at Hogwarts. These are the band of misfits that are going to save the world, you know? And it's just, they're so good. I really love each one of these kids for a different reason. And I think for most people, you know, Dustin kind of stands out because he's just so over vivacious and like, he's so cute. But yeah, I like what you said about Mike. I love that he's kind of the one who, for all intents and purposes, he's the ringleader. Yeah. And he pushes them to all do the right thing, even when he's not completely sure what the right thing is.
Well, and when he was getting ready to give up, and then they have Elle suddenly hearing through the radio Will singing The Clash. And then he decides, oh, he's got to still be alive. That's him. I know that's him. And it just totally reels you in for the next episode, because I think it was even at the end of an episode and you're going, well, now I have to know what happens because clearly there's something going on here.
Yep.
But yeah, 11 is my favorite because they don't like her. Will doesn't, I mean, I'm sorry, not Will. Mike doesn't have a crush on her immediately. He accepts her immediately, but that kind of grows over him getting to know her and realizing, wow, she's been through a lot. She doesn't seem to have any family and she needs a place to stay. And maybe she can help us find our friend.
And it is interesting that, you know, Mike has that way of caring for people, and it's not just about what they can do for him or the group.
Right.
You know, and I thought that was really cool to see too. And all of them have their different strengths, which I think is great in the way in which they create the dynamic, especially once Will is gone and Lucas and Dustin and Mike all having to interact together without somebody else who, you know, you get the feeling like Will is kind of some of the glue that helps hold the group together.
And that's what I was going to say too.
Yeah,
like
you know, and without him, they're not quite as cohesive as they used to be. And, you know, with Elle there, somebody who doesn't understand everything, that's going on and necessarily how to always act in the situations, it kind of makes things a little bit more volatile. But it does. It really creates a great dynamic, and these kids, again, are so good that I just absolutely love them, and I'm so glad that they turned out to be such fantastic little actors because, again, this show, without them being as stellar as they are, this goes from Stranger Things to suckier things.
Yes.
And so I think they really hit the jackpot. And we really have to call out, I think, the Duffer Brothers and the casting group finding these kids and making sure they got the right kids for the job, not just any kid that might have had a name in the acting world or anything like that. So,
right, because it seems like they were all first-time actors, and that they just completely told them, this is what we're wanting you to do, and let them do it. And they did a phenomenal job with it. And Millie Bobby Brown, as everyone probably knows, plays 11. I do want to talk about real quick just her origin because it's so fascinating to me. She, is brought in as possibly the missing daughter of the woman whose mind has gone numb. And but they don't confirm that for you. They're just alluding to it. And she has escaped from Hawkins Labs where they've been doing tests on her. And it seems like possibly my conjecture was that they've raised her since she was kidnapped as a baby to not be able to communicate any other way except through nonverbal means by nodding or hand signs or through mind control, through telepathy and her tests. And I think that's to hone those skills to be stronger than the need to speak. And you can tell that she goes through these horrible tests where it's not just, let's see if she can crush a can this one time. They even go as far as having her kill a cat.
Yeah.
Which shocked me. And so
seeing
you
how
feel
far her
for
power goes.
Yeah, because she's sitting there crying, going, I don't want to do this. I'm murdering something. And they're going, do it or else. And so she finally escapes, and then that's when she meets up with the kids.
Yeah, no, I think that origin, I'm really glad that we discussed that in the show. The idea of where she comes from and kind of that they really do allude to heavily that the U.S. throughout the 60s and their experience with these drugs and the deprivation tanks and everything, basically trying to create a superhero, a psychic superhero, and that they had succeeded. And I think that's one of the things that makes you hate Matthew Modine's character in the show so much, is because the psychological trauma that they're putting Eleven through. And so getting to see those flashbacks is so important to the rest of the series and to understanding her character. So, I mean, yeah. And the fact that she is phenomenal. She really is. And again, if she hadn't been anything but phenomenal, it would have really hurt this role and it would have hurt this show. But she pulls it off so beautifully, so vulnerably. It's just exactly what it needs for you to connect with her. Even if, hopefully somebody hasn't been through something as horrible as this. But you're able to connect with her on such a visceral level that, and she just portrays that so well. So, yeah.
And Matthew, as you were saying, making that role as her caregiver, but also her captor, so creepy.
Yes.
He just constantly rides that line of, she calls him Papa, but that's really all she's ever known as like a father in her life. And she doesn't even get a name. She's a number.
Well, and the fact that she's number 11, like how many others were there?
Right? Yeah.
I mean, were there...
And where are they?
Yeah, exactly. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Logan, where they find the kids. They're trying to search down these kids that still have mutant powers and everything, and they give them all numbers because they're doing this same kind of thing of experimentation and everything, and, she's X-23. So, yeah, you're like, how many more of them are there? So, no, so good. There's a whole other segment we get with the teens, and so I just kind of wanted to talk to you about that. We get Nancy and Jonathan and Steve. We have Steve and his friends who I don't really care about, whatever, and Barb. Poor Barb.
Oh, Barb.
Yeah. So do you think Barb comes back as the big Demogorgon bad person in the next one?
No, I think Barb is done.
And the way we know it's her because it has a frilly collar.
Yeah. No, I think because of the way they showed her when Hopper and Joyce see her last in the Upside Down, pale as a sheet with what looks like a slug in her mouth. I think that even though they were able to save Will, it took a lot of effort to save him. I mean, they had to sit there and give him CPR for quite a while. So
yeah.
And then just left Barb.
Yeah.
I guess they were like, yeah, she's already gone.
Yeah, I do kind of wonder like why they didn't take her body with them.
Right. That's a good
just
question.
At least let her parents know she's dead.
Yeah, let them have a funeral because they haven't.
I don't know. Would you want to see your kid like that though? Like, wouldn't you rather not see your kid and just have them say she was dead?
Yeah.
Because I don't think I'd want to see my kid like that.
Oh, no. And I think... And I will add just real quick, during that whole scene where they are trying to give Will CPR, Joyce and Hopper, that Hopper's having flashbacks of his daughter, Sarah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really strong. It's really well done.
And it makes you want to cry.
And it is interesting. So you have, Mike's older sister, Nancy. How did you feel about her and her connection with, like Jonathan and Steve?
I think Nancy is a BA. I love her. And my friend Steve Glosson and I firmly disagreed on that. He said, Nancy knew what she was doing and she got Barb killed. She's a terrible person. And I said, well, she didn't know, though. She is having this whole internal struggle of being completely unaware of the whole Will situation other than he's missing, and being more concerned, as most teenage girls are, about the day-to-day and about the boy she likes. And I don't think she was concerned with being popular as much as she really liked Steve and wanted to keep him around, so she did whatever he wanted reluctantly, which no girl should ever feel like they have to do.
Right.
But she did it anyway. But it wasn't like it wasn't consensual either. And then she starts out too as this girl that is very shy and unsure of herself, and turns into another person like Mike, who is leading the situation. And, I mean, it's hilarious. I rewatching the scene where she's at Jonathan's house and they're waiting to trap the Demogorgon, and Steve comes in, and first he's thinking, I'm just going to make amends with Jonathan. Then he goes, wait a minute, why is my girlfriend here? Then he goes, what's wrong with your hand? Did he beat you? And then he comes in and sees the bat with the nails in it, and she points a gun at him.
Yeah, and the craziness of that house. I mean, just...
Yeah, and he's like, what is happening?
Absolutely. Well, here's the thing. I don't think... Obviously, Nancy doesn't know what's going to happen to Barb. She doesn't treat Barb very well. But then everything she does after that is in reference to the guilt that she feels about what happened. Because when her mother confronts her, when she comes home, and she's like, so I slept with him. Is that what you want to know? And then she's like, that's not even really what's important here. Barb is missing. Like, she feels so guilty about what she did, and the fact that she is she does feel responsible for that. She does feel the responsibility of her and some culpability in her actions for having Barb be there in the first place and then her disappearing. And so I think Nancy's character actually has a very interesting character arc to go through of being the girl who's all about being popular in high school and wanting the popular boy the moment he starts to like her and being willing to do whatever he, wants, to being the one who is the leader and willing to do what she has to do to help other people.
Right.
And
becoming completely selfless.
Yes, actually, yes. So she goes from being selfish to selfless, and I think that's a really cool thing. And what was cool is watching how that kind of went with Steve too, because he was in that same boat of being somebody who's just out for himself, totally cool with just being the cool guy and making fun of everybody who's not like him. But you get the picture that that's not really who he is inside. And he makes that turn too, and they create that very interesting triangle with Jonathan Byers, where in the end they're all friends. Jonathan doesn't end up with Nancy. It's not that kind of thing. She stays with Steve, but they're all friends. Like, I love when he's like at the very end, "Did you give him the gift?" And she's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Awesome." Like, that's such a cool scene that, like they've created this sense of like friendship and it almost like adult type friendship where you just let bygones be bygones and you move forward. And I love that these teenagers kind of get that, when what we'll talk about in a minute is so many of these adults aren't getting anything.
Right. But yeah, I think that Barb's story is unfortunate, although I'm not one of those card-toting Save Barb fans. I think that she kind of didn't do the smartest thing either. I think Barb could have said, "No, I'm not going to go with you." But then she knew that Nancy was going to be mad at her and probably wouldn't be able to go to Steve's house because her mom wouldn't let her go. But, I think that they all do go through this huge arc of change in a good way, except for Steve's friends, who end up just being total jerks about everything. I do like that you said that, though, that it looks like Steve and Nancy and Jonathan become friends in the end, because at first what I was thinking when I watched that for the first time was that she secretly has this crush on Jonathan and isn't telling Steve. And that something is still lying under the surface that's going to bubble up again in Stranger Things 2.
Yeah, I mean, and being a show about kids this age, it totally could. The way I had read it is that everything was cool between all of them. And that the camera was from Steve. Right. It was from both of them. And I just thought that's a neat place to take it. It is funny that they turn the trope on its head for the horror thing. Where it's always, if you don't want to die, if you want to not die, don't have sex, in a horror movie. Nancy's the one who has sex and Barb doesn't, and she's the one who ends up dying. So they flip that on its head. So I thought that was that's slightly amusing and sad for Barb. So
I will add too, just a side note, if anybody is interested in watching this other YouTube clip I've seen, it's called Stranger Things in 3 minutes. And now I always think of it when I think about that scene with Barb at the pool, because there's a guy splashing up against a window with Nancy inside going, "Nancy!" Help me.
Oh, man. So we talked a little bit about some of the adults. Like, we were talking about Matthew Modine's character earlier. And I just quickly with him, he's so good in this role, because in those moments with Eleven, he's so good at manipulating her and giving her that like fatherly vibe and that like scary captor vibe all at the same time. I don't know if I want to be good at that as an actor, but he does it great.
Yeah, and there are some actors who I think are really gifted at playing that role of keeping it like a stern, creepy, mysterious appearance the entire time and playing many different villain characters in different movies like that. Like Anthony Hopkins is definitely who I think of as someone that's very versatile at playing a great bad guy like that. And I think of this guy constantly when I think of this show because he just seems to kind of creep in and creep out. You know, in a lot of his scenes, it's very dimly lit, and he's always got this questionable look on his face, like he's really thinking intently about
he's like
his
a
next
bleached
move.
blonde Batman.
Yeah.
He just kind of appears and then disappears.
Yeah. And even in the end, when he has his scene with Hopper, where he's basically got him in an interview room, he walks in and first he doesn't say anything immediately. He closes the door, he pauses, and he pulls out a pack of cigarettes and a lighter and hands it to Hopper and then says, "Where's the girl?"
Yeah, no, he is very, very good in this show. And I think he's you know, I've seen Matthew Modine in like 80s movies and stuff because that's where he's from. But to kind of see him in this role, oh man, just so creepy. Because every other movie I'd seen him in, he's like the hero guy, you know, like he's the nice guy.
Wasn't he in The Phantom, though, as the bad guy?
That I don't remember because I've never seen The Phantom.
Oh,
So,
you need to see The Phantom. Okay. Tangent for another time.
It was really interesting to me how Karen Wheeler is this mom who's trying to connect with her kids, but can't seem to find a way in anymore. And I thought that was really fascinating because she is trying to be a good mom. But I wondered if, and I wanted to know if you read it this way, that it was that she's trying to do it and she had slacked off for too long from doing it, and now her kids just aren't interested.
I agree. I think that it seems, unfortunately, that when she had their third child, Holly, that rightfully so, she was spending more of her time taking care of the younger child first, and her two older kids have now grown up so quickly, and she's kind of lost maybe her window to have the same relationship that they may have had before. And I think that now, you know, Nancy is, of course, busy dating and killing monsters now. And Will has his group of friends. I'm sorry, not Will. Mike. I keep saying Will and Mike interchangeably. Mike has his group of friends that he plays D&D with all the time. And they're just both too busy to deal with talking to mom anymore.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. And it's interesting how her character as a mother kind of mirrors Joyce as a mother. She's busy and distracted for other reasons. You know, she's a little bit emotionally unstable. You know, it's clear that her husband's left her for a, you know, much younger woman. Obviously hasn't been helping. She's struggling to keep food on the table for her kids. She knows her son, Jonathan, is having to work more than he should to try and do that, so she feels guilty about that. Like, there's so much on top of her in such a horrible way, and then Will goes missing, and all these crazy, insane things start happening around her house. And it is a wonder that she doesn't have just a severe psychotic nervous breakdown and never comes back.
Well, right. And, I mean, why did it have to be poor Joyce's house? Why couldn't it have been somebody else that maybe could have coped a little better? I mean, I guess I don't know if anyone could really cope better than another with that. But it was interesting, too, that it started in the shed and then it ended up moving to actually inside the house and never really went back there. I don't know why. But I think that you're right on the nose that she was already overworked, probably not sleeping well. She looked very just tired and frustrated when this whole thing started. And then her youngest son goes missing. And, her first reaction is, well, Jonathan, you were supposed to watch him. You were supposed to be home. I told you not to work when I'm working. Trying to make him like a parent as well, which is unfair to a high school boy. And then she's got to prove that she's not crazy and that Will is not dead, that she knows that there's something going on but can't put her finger on what it is. I mean, that's got to drive you nuts.
Yeah, and Winona Ryder is just phenomenal as this character. I mean, the way that she draws you in and just holds your attention anytime she's on screen. And what I love about her, and again, it's kind of interesting comparing her and Karen are kind of mirrors for each other in the sense that, Karen kind of has everything that Joyce probably thinks she wanted, like a good family, steady husband who's not leaving, all that kind of stuff. And she doesn't have any of that. And yet she is still more connected with her kids. When you see those flashbacks, she's very connected with Will. You get the feeling like before things went super crazy for them, she was connected with Jonathan in a good way. So she has a good relationship with her sons in a way that Karen would love to have with her kids, but doesn't. And so I love the way in which they kind of show these characters kind of mirroring each other and giving you different aspects. And it's like, in a lot of ways, it's almost just like life is never perfect. Like life is never going to be perfect, and you just kind of have to deal with what you got.
The grass is always greener kind of situation. It seems. I'm glad that you said that they kind of mirror each other, because I didn't think about that as much. But I think that it's that Karen really expects a lot of her kids, or not a lot, but I mean, she expects them to get good grades, to have a curfew, to, she really probably doesn't seem to want Nancy to date yet, but Nancy's doing it behind her back, and wishes that Mike wouldn't play so much D&D when he needs to come up for dinner. And it just seems like she's always kind of annoyed with her kids. Whereas I feel like Joyce really encourages Jonathan and Will, when you can see the flashbacks of times being good, encourages them to be kids. They had Castle Byers off in the woods, and she knew exactly where it was and used to play with him there. And you never see Karen having that kind of relationship with her kids.
Yeah, it's almost like Karen is wanting the picture-perfect family and trying to get that.
To a fault.
Yeah, and Joyce is much more comfortable with just her kids being who they are.
And maybe she was like, well, Lonnie's gone. Things are already not going so great, so I got to make the best of what I got.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. Last but not least at all, I think Hopper is kind of, next to the kids, Hopper's kind of the heart of this. And I love Hopper so much as a character in this show. I love the way, he goes through this whole experience with these kids, and it doesn't change who he is radically, but he lightens up just a little bit there by the end, and he truly cares by the end of this. Like, this whole situation finds a way of bringing him out of that kind of like drunken stupor he's been in since his daughter died and his wife left.
Which feels like it's been years.
Yeah. It's definitely been years, enough years, because she's remarried and has another kid now.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he's just kind of been coasting, and this gave him meaning again. And not just that, but I think, kind of talking about these mirrors, Hopper is definitely the mirror from, in some ways, I think Matthew Modine's character, Dr. Brenner, where he's truly was a great father to his daughter. Mm-hmm. And then he turns out to be a pretty great parent to these kids that he is committed to making sure he saves. Because of what happened to him before with his daughter, he couldn't save her, because it's out of his hands.
Right.
But this, he will do everything he can to make sure it doesn't happen to somebody else. And I just love the way they gave him that motivation and the way that that brings him back to life in a lot of ways. And in fact, I almost feel like this is the redemption of Jim Hopper.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, too, that it's interesting that they throw back in when he is having the scenes in the lab, again, when he's being grilled by them about what he knows. First of all, I think it's funny that they think he's working for someone that's like their competition, and he's like,
right, like he's a
just a
Russian
guy.
KGB agent or something.
Who do you work for? Who sent you? And he just completely, they tell him, well, you know, you're just a guy who took one too many pills, you know, basically saying out loud that they're going to drug him and make him think that this never happened again. And he's saying, I know everything. And like you said, you know, it is his redemption because he realizes this is something he can control. He's going to do everything possible and go to the ends of the earth to make sure that Will gets back to his family, and that he unfortunately seems to think he can't save 11. I think he did rat out the kids that they were at the school, but that he felt like he had to do that in order to get the lab to do anything.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the thing that's going to be really interesting for Stranger Things 2, to see how the deal he made plays out.
Right, because they did drive him off somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And is he Lando?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's really
I loved that
fascinating.
tie-in,
Yeah,
by the way.
yeah, that's awesome. Well, what was, one of the things that was really interesting to me was just the way that this show kind of showed all of these fathers being kind of awful. Like,
mm-hmm.
the Wheeler dad is the most, like, it's like he's stoned all the time.
Yeah, like he just has no personality.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said even when Will goes missing, it seems that he's just sitting there at the dinner table going, yeah, so why is that my problem?
I just don't, that was something that was really interesting, kind of watching this idea of these kind of absentee fathers, because he is completely absent for his family. He's so clueless to what's going on. And then, like we said earlier, it's so weird because we don't really see Lucas's or Dustin's parents. I think we might see them at the funeral, but it's in passing. Yeah. And the only one in this whole situation who turns out to be kind of a good father is Hopper, because, the buyer's father is a total, he's the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
Like, when he comes into the story, man, I wanted to punch that guy so badly.
Didn't you? Especially when he comes back to the house like, baby, I'm home, finally. And then he's talking about all these great things that they're going to do, and he's going to fix the house up. And then he gets into that story about, well, don't you care about Jonathan going to the college he wants to go to? We got to make sure that he's got the money. And she's like, oh, you're here for the money. That was just unbelievable.
Yeah. And that was, again, it was one of those things where you're kind of mirroring this other dad who's just, again, completely absent in the Wheeler household. And none of these men are doing anything that they should.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have, Daddy Byers, Daddy Wheeler, and then Papa. And these are just all awful guys.
Mm-hmm.
Awful. And the only one who's kind of doing anything that's even remotely fatherish is Hopper. And it's because that fatherly instinct comes back. And I like that happening.
Yeah. And it does make you wish that the other three realized what they had. I guess with Papa, Matthew Modine, that he wasn't technically 11's father, so you can't really say that about him.
Well, how do we know that?
That's true. We don't know.
Could be. Maybe if that was the mom, that we saw, who knows? Maybe
they had a thing.
her Papa. Maybe he really is just that evil,
Yeah.
which would be even scarier.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's just something that really just struck me. I also kind of liked, and I think this was interesting, and it's just kind of a small thing, but the way that they use that rift between Mike and Nancy, and how they realize they've grown apart because of everything they've been going through in their lives, and the way they kind of come back to each other in that, I thought was really cute and sweet.
That one scene where they kind of are talking about
no
each
more
other's
secrets from
lives.
each other.
Right. And then wasn't it like did you really sleep with Steve? And she's like, so anyway.
Yeah. No, he asked her, are you with Jonathan Byers now? I thought you were with Steve. And she's like, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
And didn't she ask him something like,
so you're
are
like
you
11
dating
now?
this 11
Yeah.
girl?
Yeah. He's like, what? No. Ew, gross. It was so cute. It was really
no more
cute.
secrets, but not those.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This show is so well done. I don't know if it's possible, but Christy, if you had a rating for Stranger Things, what would it be?
Seriously, this is like a 9.5 out of 10 for me because, and I'm going to say 9.5 out of 10 Demogorgons just because I can't think of another D&D character right now. But because the only things that deducted for me from it being absolutely perfect were a couple things that I thought were maybe kind of too easy, like that the kids happened to be in AV club and then they ended up being able to use the radio later to use 11 to find Will. That seemed like a little too on the nose for me. And then some of the questions that weren't answered, I didn't necessarily feel like they had to answer them, but kind of wish they had answered some of them more, like why they never went back to saying why Nancy trusted Jonathan after seeing the pictures he took of her.
Yeah, that's a good, yeah. Or maybe she just felt bad for him because she knew everybody was a jerk to him.
And maybe he's never seen a shirtless girl before. I'm not going to go. Anyway, so yeah, I felt like those kind of things took off a little bit for me, but overall that it was just impressive with a multitude of reasons. One being the actors that did such a great job with the characters they were given. Two, I think that the way that the scenes were lit and cut together really give you that creepy vibe for every single episode. I love the way that it, like we said, ties in 80s sci-fi and horror. It really reminded me a lot of Alien, Poltergeist, and E.T. the most. And then even some of the Goonies being like a band of the boys together and everything, or boys and girls. It really just has everything you're looking for in a good sci-fi mystery kind of show. And then on top of that, they had this incredible music, like including The Clash over and over again, which I love anyway.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that this is 9 out of 10 protection casts. So
there you go.
Casting the protection there. This really is, it's such a phenomenal start. It's the show that, if they hadn't ended it with Will the way they did, it could never have a sequel and be perfect.
Right.
It's that kind of show. Like if they didn't leave you with that one hint there, you could have never had anything else and been good. And that's spectacular story writing. And I think they've written themselves into the place where this season was so good, they put pretty much everything they could into it. Now they have to one-up themselves. And so they've kind of put themselves in the upside down, if you ask me. Because everybody's going to have the highest of expectations going in now. And that can really hurt you. So I don't envy them whatsoever. At all.
The terror that is making sure this works.
Yes, absolutely. Like it's going to be difficult, but I trust them to be able to do it. Yeah, and as you said, the music here is great. I mean, the synth soundtrack is so 1980s. It's awesome. and everything works. I love the actors, I love the characters, I love the story. I can watch this again and still get things out of it and still enjoy it, and I probably will. So yeah, absolutely a fantastic show, and it just leaves me wanting more Stranger Things, which luckily in a couple weeks we'll be talking about. So stay tuned.
You mean a couple days? No.
Well, from when we're recording, yes,
it comes
the show
out in a couple
out.
days.
So, but yeah, absolutely excited to have gotten a chance to talk this through with Christy, and I can't wait to talk about Stranger Things 2 in a few weeks. If you'd like to connect with us, make sure you hit us up on Twitter at TrekFM or go to trek.fm/contact, choose a show, choose the 602 Club, and send an email to us. We'd love to talk to you that way. Or, of course, on the Babel Conference. I really want to say thank you to Ken Tripp and Davis Grayson. As I said earlier, this is the 3rd anniversary for the 602 Club. And these guys have been with the show almost the entire way as associate producers. And it really means so much to me that they have supported this show and the entire network through their gifts on Patreon to us as a network. So if you like what we do here and you'd like to support us, we definitely need your help. We're a huge network and there's no way we can do it on our own. So go over to patreon.com/TrekFM. See how you can be part of the team. Every little bit helps every month. So join up. We've got some great perks for you. We love to give back. We also love to give you great content each and every day of the week. Again, that's patreon.com/TrekFM. Christy, where can everybody find you if they want to talk some Stranger Things? Or I know you've been doing a lot of different things around the internet, so what's going on with you?
Sure. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at MorrChristy, MorrChristy. And I love to talk Stranger Things, Star Wars. I have just started writing for the Star Wars Report. Did my first book review on Leia, Princess of Alderaan. And then I also write for fangirlnextdoor.com for my friend Teresa. So you'll see lots more of me on the internet.
Yes, and you're a huge part of all the episodes we do of Bond. So make sure you check that out too. So
yeah.
You could find me on Twitter at MattRushing02 as well as Instagram under the same name. I'm here on the network with Chris Jones talking about Star Trek Deep Space Nine on the Orb. I'm on the Nerd Party Network, where I am talking about Star Wars with John Mills on Aggressive Negotiations, and then talking about Harry Potter with Drea Kaufman. We're going through each and every chapter of the Harry Potter books, one chapter at a time on Owl Post, so check that out. And last but not least, doing a show with my friend Courtney, and that's called Cinema Stories. And we are talking about films through the lens of faith. And we just actually did a holiday special about all our favorite holiday movies for Halloween and Christmas. So make sure you check all of those out on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you so much for joining us. And y'all come back now, you hear?
You still have that bat?
Bat? What bat?
The one with the nails.